We are standing by because any moment now, a high-stakes meeting is getting underway in Switzerland. Iranian and European officials opening critical windows for diplomacy as the conflict between Iran and Israel threatens to explode into a war involving the United States. And President Trump giving himself some breathing room before deciding whether the U.S. will directly join the fight militarily. In Geneva this hour, Iran's foreign minister is meeting with his counterparts from the U.K., France, and Germany, as well as the EU's foreign policy chief. French President Emmanuel Macron says the diplomats will offer Iran, and I'm quoting here, complete negotiations over its nuclear program. Overnight, Israel says it responded to fires near a tech park that houses a Microsoft office after an Iranian missile was intercepted there. And the Israeli military says Iran has fired a fresh barrage of missiles towards northern, central, and southern Israel. Our Anderson Cooper is on the ground in Tel Aviv, where sirens have been wailing not just long ago. What are you experiencing, and where are you at this hour?
We are in a bomb shelter along with a lot of other people in a hotel several feet below the ground. The air raid sirens. The air raid sirens went off shortly around 3 o'clock or so here in the afternoon, which is obviously in the middle of the day. As you know, oftentimes it's been at night. Yesterday morning there was one around 7 a.m. But what makes this difference is that these sirens went out over most of the country. So people were told over most of the country of Israel to seek shelter in bomb shelters. It looks like people have now been given the all clear. So there's people who are now leaving this shelter. We're told there were dozens of missiles fired toward Israel. We're told there have been impacts in several places in the country, in the south, along the coast, and elsewhere. We don't know the extent of those impacts. We don't know what the result has been. But this is something that has impacted or certainly gotten the attention of most of the country. You can hear these warning alerts. That's the all clear. But those warning alerts went out across the country just a short time ago for people to seek shelter. It seems like, I'm not sure, some people have left. It looks like there's a lot of people still staying here. So this is a very dynamic situation. This is the largest alert that we have seen countrywide over the last several days, Sarah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you point out something really important. This is a large barrage that's happening in the daytime. Often you see this at night. Just give me some sense of life in Israel right now when you are having to, I'm assuming constantly, try to get to some kind of shelter, and how people are responding. You were there, you said, with a lot of other people who were in or near the hotel at the time this started to happen.
Yeah, and I should say now it looks like more people are starting to leave the shelter. We just got the all clear, just so you know. Look, there's I don't want to say normalcy to this, but there's not a panic to this. There's not people crying down here. This is not the way it was a week ago from all that we saw in Tel Aviv and elsewhere in Israel. There were hundreds of missiles being fired. People died. Thankfully, we don't know what the result of these missiles are, but yesterday there was a barrage that came through around 7 a.m. in the morning. No fatalities, though some people were injured in that hospital, as you know, in Beersheba. Remains to be seen what's happened to this, but it has taken on an air of routine. People are behind this operation against Iran for the most part, and they support it. They believe it's important. It's been long discussed. And now they are just trying to get on with their lives. Normal life has not returned in that there's not restaurants open, places where people gather. There's still warnings in place about large gatherings of people. But there were people swimming in the ocean when these alarms went off. I saw them paddle boarding back to the shore to try to get to a shelter in time. So it takes on a routine, but it is still something like this is just a reminder. In the middle of a day, dozens of missiles, we're not sure what else, being fired toward Israel is just a reminder of the seriousness of this situation.
Yeah, very much so. Thank you for your reporting there. Thank you to you and your crew. And I'm glad that you're in a safe space at this hour. And you've said you've now been given the all clear. Thank you, Anderson. Appreciate it.
A chance at diplomacy, a critical meeting getting underway in Geneva between Iranian and European officials. This comes as President Trump says he's going to give up to 2 weeks to decide whether the U.S. will get involved in military strikes against Iran. With us now, Max Boot, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations. Max, thanks so much for being with us. This chance at diplomacy here, what is it you think that Iran could promise that maybe should keep the U.S. from getting involved or should be enough to stop this conflict?
Well, at this point, I think what Iran needs to promise is to give up all of their nuclear enrichment, to give up their entire nuclear program. The question is, are they going to be willing to do that? And I would probably say the likelihood is that they will not be willing to do that even now, even when they're under assault from Israel. But I think that has to be the ask, and that's a greater ask than what they were willing to give up in 2015 during the original Iran nuclear deal.
It's interesting because giving up all enrichment they've said no. They said they won't give up all enrichment, but it's just for civilian use, is what they said. But it does seem increasingly that even some Democrats, Chris Coons, who I had on before, look, he's not calling for military action, but he is saying Iran should agree to give up all this nuclear enrichment here. This now seems to be something that more and more people are coalescing around.
I agree. More and more people outside of Iran,
right.
Whether the Iranian leadership is willing to give this up, I still have my doubts. And if they're not, then that's going to leave us with some very unpleasant choices because yesterday basically President Trump punted for a couple of weeks, quote unquote, his decision about whether to use force. But the reality is Israel cannot bomb the Fordow nuclear complex, which is the crown jewel of the Iranian nuclear program. They cannot bomb it into destruction. The only way to do that is with a U.S. attack. And even there's not a guarantee that it'll work.
I want to come back to that notion in just one second, because I think that's an important question to ask. But first, on the idea of negotiations, is there anything that Iran could promise that would make Israel accept that they're not enriching uranium? In other words, is there a deal you think that could be reached that would be acceptable to Israel? Forget the United States for a second.
Well, I think the deal that would be acceptable to Israel would be if Iran, in fact, promises to give up all of their enrichment capacity and also has very intrusive international inspections. That's what was being demanded before, but that's what Iran has never been willing to give up at the negotiating table. And we just have to see if the current Israeli attack has changed the calculus for Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei.
Okay, and then back to that question, which I think is a really key one here. It is said that the United States has the only capability to bomb the Fordow Nuclear Enrichment Center, the only bomb that can get deep inside the ground to do it. But how much of a guarantee is it that even if the U.S. does use that weapon, that it would end the Iranian nuclear program?
It's not a guarantee at all. And in fact, there's a big question mark as to whether even the U.S., with its 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs, whether even we can destroy the Fordow complex, which is buried more than 100 feet underground. I was talking to a former defense official yesterday who was telling me that it's like the shot against the Death Star on Star Wars. You got to put it in exactly the right place, and you're going to have multiple munitions hitting the exact same impact point. So there's an uncertainty as to whether the attack will even work. But even if it does work, nobody should fool themselves into thinking that this will eradicate the Iranian nuclear threat for all time. It will set it back for maybe a year or two, maybe longer. But the Iranians can always reconstitute that program because they have the nuclear know-how to do so.
Well, is it clear to you if the U.S. does do this, does bomb the plant, what happens the day after? Is it clear to you what the United States plan would be going forward?
It's not clear to me, and it's probably not clear to President Trump, which I suspect is part of the reason why he's hesitating, because we have to be ready for the contingency that if we attack Fordow, Iran is going to lash out. And there are a lot of U.S. bases within very easy missile firing range of Iran. And there is also the threat of Iran conceivably mining or trying to disrupt traffic in the Straits of Hormuz, which is where 20% of the world's oil passes through that. So these are contingencies we have to prepare for. These are very serious threats, even in Iran's weakened condition.
You've had Israeli leaders over the last 24 hours making their most explicit calls for regime change. The defense minister saying that Iran's supreme leader cannot continue to exist. What does injecting the idea of regime change into this discussion, how does that affect negotiations and affect U.S. decisions?
Well, conceivably, it puts more pressure on the Iranian regime to compromise on their nuclear program, but I don't think it's a realistic possibility. I'm not aware of a single instance in the annals of military history of a regime being overthrown by aerial attack alone. And in fact, the more common pattern is that when countries are attacked from the air, as we've seen in the case of Ukraine recently, the people coalesce around their government because they do not like having their cities bombed and destroyed. So, I think this regime change idea, which is out there from Prime Minister Netanyahu, is a dog that won't hunt. I think it's a dangerous misconception.